Today I'm going to be talking about creating your own schedule. So the first thing I need to discuss is the elements of a schedule. A stage represents how many users are running at a particular time. And it's also referred to as a plateau because you have a constant number of users running for a period of time, so it's a plateau. And you want to run the same number of users for a long enough period of time that you have enough data points for each transaction during a plateau. So it allows you to get some decent averages. And you also want to run a stage long enough so that you can verify that the response time stays the same while there's the same number of users running. In other words, you would not expect response time to grow if the user load stays the same. So if you run the stage long enough, you can take a look and make sure that over time the response time stays the same, since the load should be the same. Another element of a schedule is the ramp-up rate, and that says how fast you want to add users. Let's just say that a particular stage has 1,000 users in it. If you added all 1,000 users at one time, it doesn't typically mimic the real world. In the real world, users arrive at an arrival rate. And if you have, it's not likely you're going to have 1,000 hitting all at once, or 1,000 arriving all at once. So the ramp-up rate spreads the users out over time. There are cases where you might want to test 1,000 users all hitting the system at one time. For example, after a crash, and your system comes back up, everybody's there and they're all going to come back on right away. But that's not the typical thing that you want to look at in a performance test. I mean, there are reasons to look at that, but not in a performance test. Another schedule element is the settle time. That's the amount of time that RPT reaches a plateau before it's actually going to start doing measurements. And the reason for having any settle time at all is that you know that as soon as you reach the plateau, there's a user that's going to be doing the very first action in that plateau. And by having settle time means that RPT is not going to start measuring throughput right away, and it gives users a chance to spread their actions out more and randomize their actions more. You don't have to use settle time, but it's not a bad idea to give it some time so that it's a little bit less predictable what the actions are right away. Also, why our test groups have endless loops, and they have endless loops because the stage duration actually controls how long that loop is going to go for. So you don't have to say loop until the test is done. You say loop for 10 minutes, and then it goes on to the next stage. And I'll also show how to add stages to a schedule. So let me demonstrate that with the schedule that I put together earlier. It defaulted just has 5 users. That's the user load being shown, and it shows for that particular stage run until it's done. And that shows you what your user load for the duration of that test is. That just shows us 5 users running until all the loops are finishing. I'm not sure why it finishes in 10 minutes. Now there's an advanced button that you can click that'll show you the change rate and the settle time. And the change rate is the ramp-up rate, and the settle time that I discussed. And so if I want to change the number of users, I can just type into that column, and I can edit the schedule and say run for a period of time. If you run for until all work continues, it'll just loop through each user one time and then it'll finish. So here I said run 1,000 users for 15 minutes, and I don't want to have 1,000 users coming up all at once, so let's just say one user starts every 2 seconds, and I'm going to let it settle for 60 seconds before RPT starts measuring the response times. And there it shows the changes that I made. And down below you can see what the schedule looks like now. It's going to ramp up for 30 minutes, and then for 15 minutes or 10 minutes, whatever I said, it's going to stay at the plateau. So that's It just shows what the schedule looks like after I've made that one change. Now I still only have one stage in this test. So let me add additional ones. First of all, let's not start with 1,000 users. Typically, it's not a bad idea to have the first stage just have a very small number of users so you can warm up your system, your caches, whatever. Typically, I'll do the first stage with like 5 users and I'll let it run for just a few minutes just to get the warm up out of the way. And I'm not usually interested in the performance numbers during that. So here now I'm saying, okay, add some more stages. Add 5 stages. Have each one last for 15 minutes. Ramp up 1 user every 1 second. And let it settle for 60 seconds before I start measuring. And it shows you there, gives you a little summary of what what your run looks like. And for fun, let's make it 10 stages. And when you get done, there it shows you all the different stages with the parameters that I've got there. So the first stage is 10, the second one's 110, the third one's 210, and on and on and on. And when you get done doing that, this is what the schedule looks like. So now it's going to run for, I don't know, 200 minutes, and it shows each of the stages and how long they're going to last. So you get some idea how long your run's going to take. And if you want to change the stage duration, you can just type it in right there. Like I say, my first stage is typically a warm-up stage. Don't want to keep it going too long. And since I started at 10 and I added 100 each time, I ended up with everything having 110, 210, 310. That's not really what I wanted. So let's just change that so I have a nice round number of users at each stage. And let's add one more stage. Show you how to do that. Now it'll go up to 1,000 users at the end. And the schedule preview looks like that. It's going to run for 200 minutes or something, which is a pretty long run. Might not want to have 10 stages. So when you save the test, it tells you you got a really long run and you're gathering statistics every 5 seconds, and it recommends a longer sampling interval. Now you don't lose any information when you do that. It just means that RPT is running averages for a longer period of time, or collecting averages less frequently. And so there you have a quick look at how to create a schedule and modify it and what the schedule elements are.